My name is Clara, and the story I'm about to tell you begins 2 years after I married Ethan. Our love story was like a fairy tale at the start. We met at a summer music festival. I remember dropping my drink, and when I looked up, there he was, offering me his. His smile was genuine, his eyes sincere. It felt like one of those moments when you just know. "Need a hand?" he had asked, pointing at the spilled drink on the ground. I had laughed, feeling embarrassed. "Looks like I do." We talked for hours that night. From our favorite movies to our shared love of hiking, it felt like we'd known each other forever. By the end of the festival, Ethan and I were inseparable, and within a year, we were married. However, life has a way of bringing challenges. For us, that challenge came in the form of Ethan's family, particularly his mother, Mrs. Mason, and his sister Lila. I moved into the family home after the wedding. It was Ethan's idea. He said it would help us save for our own place. I was hesitant, but eventually agreed. At first, Mrs. Mason seemed welcoming, but as days turned into weeks, her true nature began to show. Every decision I made, whether it was about the house, Ethan, or even the smallest things like what to cook, was met with criticism. "Ethan doesn't like spicy food," she would remark when I tried making a new recipe. It felt odd because Ethan and I had shared spicy dishes on many of our dates. "Did you know that, Clara?" Lila would often chime in through Skype from Hawaii, her tone always condescending. "You should pay more attention to what my brother likes." Even when they were not together, Lila and Mrs. Mason seemed to be on the same team, always pointing out what they felt I was doing wrong. Ethan, on the other hand, was often caught in the middle. I expected him to stand up for me, but he rarely did. Most times, he chose to stay quiet, which felt like a betrayal. One evening after dinner, I tried discussing it with him. "Ethan, do you notice how your mother and Lila treat me?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "They're just looking out for me, Clara. They want the best for me." I felt a lump in my throat. "And am I not the best?" He sighed, avoiding my eyes. "It's not that. They just need time to get used to you." But time wasn't helping. As days went by, I felt more like an outsider in my own home. I missed the days of the music festival, where the promise of love felt so strong. Here, amidst the walls of the Mason family house, our foundation was shaking, and I wasn't sure how long I could hold on. The only solace I found was in Ethan's grandfather, Joe. He was kind and always had a listening ear. Whenever things got tough, I would think of him and feel a bit better. But the real test of our relationship was just around the corner, and it came in the form of an invitation to Hawaii. Little did I know that this would be the tipping point, forcing me to take drastic measures. Upon finding the beautifully adorned envelope, a surge of excitement coursed through me. The idea of a brief respite in Hawaii seemed like a dream. I quickly opened it, and the words, "You're invited," gleamed in golden letters. It was an invitation to Grandpa Joe's 80th birthday. The prospect of spending time with Grandpa, who always showed me kindness, filled me with hope. Just as I was getting lost in the details of the invitation, Ethan entered. "What's that?" he asked, not even bothering to hide the hint of annoyance in his voice. "It's an invitation from your grandfather. He's celebrating his 80th birthday in Hawaii," I replied, trying to gauge his reaction. Ethan took a quick glance. "Oh, that. Lila mentioned it." His tone caught me off guard. "She did? Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged, dismissing the matter. Must have slipped my mind. The phone suddenly rang, its shrill tone piercing the room. Before I could answer, Ethan grabbed it. I could hear Lila's voice, sharp and demanding. Ethan listened, nodding occasionally, casting sidelong glances at me. My heart sank with every nod. When he finally hung up, he looked squarely at me. "Lila thinks it's best if you stayed behind," he stated, with an air of finality. I was astounded. "But your grandfather invited me personally. Why wouldn't I come?" Ethan sighed dramatically, making it seem like he was bearing a huge burden. "Look, it's a family thing. Grandpa was just being polite. Plus, Lila said you should stay with Mom and keep her company." I felt my voice shake, trying to suppress my rising emotions. "Ethan, I'm your wife. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I thought you'd stand up for me." Ethan smirked. "Always playing the victim, aren't you? Why do you always make things so difficult?" I felt tears pricking my eyes, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I thought I meant something to you." He laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that cut deeper than any words could. You think too much. It was clear to me then. My place in this family, or lack thereof, wasn't just Lila or Mrs. Mason's doing. Ethan was part of the problem. He was more than happy to let me bear the brunt of their disdain, to be their scapegoat, to keep the peace for himself. The invitation that had once promised a fresh start now felt like a cruel joke. I was alone in this, and if I was going to find my place, or escape from this trap, it would be on my own terms. The days following the revelation about the trip were thick with tension. I busied myself with work and chores, trying my best to stay out of Ethan's and Mrs. Mason's way. The hurt was still fresh, and every encounter was a painful reminder of my place, or lack thereof, in the family. Ethan was unusually quiet around me. Every time our paths crossed, he'd avoid eye contact, his guilt evident. But it wasn't guilt that would change anything. He was just uneasy about the confrontation. One evening, while Ethan was out and Mrs. Mason was in her room, I decided to pack for them. Call it a wife's duty, or maybe I was just trying to prove something to myself. Either way, I felt it was something I needed to do. I meticulously folded their clothes, making sure everything was in order. The Hawaii trip was supposed to be a joyful occasion, and even if I wasn't going, I wanted to make sure they had everything they needed. It was a silent way of showing that despite everything, I was still trying to be a supportive wife. As I was zipping up Ethan's suitcase, I noticed that it was strikingly similar to mine. Same size, same color, same brand. A mischievous idea began to form. I could switch the suitcases. Ethan's had all the important travel documents for him and Mrs. Mason. My suitcase had my personal items, nothing of great significance. It was out of character for me to even think of such a thing. But the recent events had stirred something within. I was tired of being overlooked, of being the one who always had to understand, to adjust. Maybe, just maybe, they needed a wake-up call. And so I acted on the impulse. I swapped the contents of the suitcases, leaving Ethan's travel documents in my suitcase. I placed the suitcase in my closet and left Ethan's, now filled with my belongings, ready for the trip. It was a simple act, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control. Whatever the outcome, it was a step, however small, towards reclaiming my worth. The next days would certainly be eventful. The morning sun streamed through the bedroom window, casting a soft golden hue across the room. I stretched, feeling surprisingly refreshed despite the weight of the recent events. As I sat on the bed, the reality of the suitcase switch began to sink in. I had done something bold, something completely out of character, and it gave me an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. As I sipped my morning coffee, my thoughts shifted to what would come next. Ethan and Mrs. Mason were scheduled to leave in a few days, and I had effectively blocked their plans. They would realize the switch at the airport, and the fallout would be significant. But was that enough? As these thoughts circled, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica, my close friend from university days. We had lost touch over the years, but our bond was one that time couldn't erode. "Hey, long time no chat. How have you been?" Jessica's message read. I hesitated for a moment before replying. "Hi, Jess. It's been a roller coaster. Can we talk?" Minutes later, my phone rang. "Clara? What's going on? You sound serious." I sighed deeply. "Ethan and his family. They've made things tough for me." Jessica listened patiently as I narrated the events leading up to the suitcase switch. When I finished, there was a pause before she finally spoke. "Wow, Clara. I don't even know what to say, but I'm glad you did something about it. You've always been too nice." I chuckled. "Yeah, maybe too nice for my own good." Jessica continued. "You know, if you need a break, you should come over to my place. It's been ages since we caught up, and maybe some time away will do you good." The idea was appealing. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense. It'll be just like old times. Plus, I could use the company." A plan began to form in my mind. Not just a short-term plan to evade the immediate fallout of the suitcase switch, but a long-term one. A plan to take back control of my life. "Okay, Jess, I'll come. But I want to do more than just visit. I need a fresh start, away from all this mess." Jessica's voice was filled with enthusiasm. "Absolutely, let's do it. We'll figure it out together." Over the next couple of days, I started preparing. Within the home office, I quickly secured my finances. Transferring funds and locking Ethan out of joint accounts was easier than I anticipated. The reality of it all made me feel empowered. No longer would I let Ethan or his family control any aspect of my life, including my finances. I packed my essential belongings, making sure to leave Ethan's and Mrs. Mason's things untouched. When everything was packed and set, I allowed myself a brief moment of reflection. I thought of the love Ethan and I once shared, the dreams we had built together. But as quickly as the memories surfaced, I shut them out. This was not the time to get emotional. Every step felt like a step towards freedom. The day of Ethan and Mrs. Mason's scheduled departure arrived. As they left for the airport, I wished them a safe trip, holding back a smirk. Once their car was out of sight, I quickly grabbed my bags and called a cab. As I looked at our home from the backseat of the cab, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, but also relief and hope. Hope for a new beginning, a life where I was in control. Jessica was waiting for me when I arrived at her apartment. We hugged tightly, two old friends reconnecting in the midst of chaos. "It's going to be okay, Clara," she whispered. I nodded. "I know. It's a new chapter." And as the evening sun set, casting a beautiful orange glow across the city, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Once at Jessica's, I took a few hours to relax and catch my breath. The warmth of her welcome was just what I needed, a stark contrast to the coldness I had escaped. As evening approached, I remembered my phone, which I had purposely turned off. Curiosity and a bit of defiance prompted me to switch it on. Instantly, notifications began to pour in. Missed calls, voice messages, texts. The sheer number was overwhelming. But rather than feeling anxious or fearful, a profound sense of satisfaction took over me. Each notification was evidence of the panic and confusion I had left in my wake. The number of them, each one a testament to their disarray, filled my heart with joy and vengeful pleasure. Jessica, spotting the triumphant glint in my eye, asked, "All good?" I showed her the barrage of missed calls, and we both shared a laugh. "Better than good," I replied. "To new beginnings and finding your own path," Jessica toasted, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. "To finally living for myself." Jessica and I were sprawled across her living room floor, with takeout boxes scattered around us, talking late into the night. We were sharing old stories, laughing at some of the mischief we got up to during our college days. It was comforting, and for a moment, I felt like my old self again. The moment was short-lived. My phone, which I'd left on the coffee table, began to ring. The screen showed Ethan's number. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. Jessica gave me a reassuring nod. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Where are you?" Ethan's voice boomed from the other side. His tone was a mix of anger and desperation. "I'm safe, Ethan," I replied calmly, deliberately avoiding answering his question. "What have you done?" he yelled. "Mom's crying. We missed the flight and you just disappeared." "I did what I had to do, for myself," I said firmly. "This isn't like you. You're acting crazy. Why are you doing this?" he exclaimed. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to remain calm. "This is the result of the choices you and your family made, Ethan. I've been feeling trapped, ignored, and mocked. When your sister told me not to come, and you didn't stand up for me, that was the last straw." Ethan scoffed. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. It was just a family reunion." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "It's not just about the reunion, Ethan. It's about respect. You never took my side. You never protected our relationship from your family's judgments. You laughed at my feelings. That reunion was just a representation of how little you value our relationship." I could hear his mother's voice in the background, shouting, "Ask her where our documents are. We need them." Ethan tried to keep his voice calm, though I could hear the strain. "Look, just come back home. We can sort this out." I replied, "It's not that simple anymore, Ethan. I need space to think, to decide what's best for me." Jessica motioned for the phone. Surprised, I handed it to her. "Ethan," she began, her voice firm, "listen carefully. She's safe, and she's with friends who care about her. You need to respect her decision and give her some space." He didn't reply for a moment. Then he said, "Fine, but we need our documents." "They're in the house," I interjected. "Exactly where you left them. But maybe next time, you'll double-check things for yourself." With that, I ended the call, I turned off the phone just to be sure no more interruptions would come through. Jessica sighed and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "It's going to be okay. You're strong and you're not alone." I smiled weakly. "Thanks, Jessica. I just wish it didn't have to be this way." She squeezed my shoulder. "Sometimes, life pushes us in ways we never expected, but it leads to better things." I leaned against her, taking comfort from her words. The confrontation had drained me, but it had also reaffirmed my belief that I was making the right choice. For the first time in years, I was prioritizing myself, and it felt liberating. I woke up the next day to the sound of birds chirping outside Jessica's window. The sunlight streamed in, filling the room with warmth. I stretched and then checked the time. It was still early, but I felt surprisingly refreshed. There was a feeling of determination building inside of me. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, and now I needed to tie up some loose ends. One thing that had been on my mind was Ethan's grandfather. I didn't want him to think ill of me, or believe the twisted story that Ethan and his family might spin. I had always admired him, and I felt he deserved to hear my side of things. Picking up my phone, I dialed his number. After a couple of rings, he answered. "Hello?" His voice was gentle and warm. "Hi, Grandpa Joe. It's me," I began, a bit nervously. "Ah, my dear. I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Been quite a commotion over here. Ethan and his mother seem to have misplaced some documents." I chuckled. Yes, there was a little mix-up. Grandpa Joe sighed. "I've heard bits and pieces of what happened. Ethan's not too pleased, and well, his mother is her usual self, but I want to hear it from you." Taking a deep breath, I recounted everything, from the way Ethan's family had treated me, the incident with the reunion, and the decision I made afterward. Throughout my retelling, Grandpa Joe listened quietly. When I finished, he spoke. "You've been through a lot, more than anyone should have to bear." "I just couldn't take it anymore, Grandpa Joe," I replied. "I love Ethan, but it felt like it was me against his whole family." He paused for a moment. "You did what was right for you, and I respect that. It's a shame Ethan never truly saw what a gem he had in you." Hearing his words, I felt a rush of emotions. "Thank you, Grandpa Joe. I just wanted you to know. I didn't want you to think badly of me." He laughed softly. "Never. You've always been honest and kind. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions to protect yourself." "I wish things had been different," I whispered. "Life has a way of moving in mysterious directions," he replied. "But remember, each challenge you face only makes you stronger." We spoke for a bit longer, discussing his upcoming birthday plans and how he hoped I would visit him someday. Before we ended the call, he said, "You have my blessing, dear, whatever path you choose." Hanging up, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. With Grandpa Joe's understanding and support, I felt even more resolute in my decision. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it head-on. Life without Ethan and his toxic family was like a breath of fresh air. It was as if I had been underwater for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply breathe. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose and joy. I no longer had to tiptoe around or constantly be on guard, dreading the next insult or confrontation. With each passing day, my self-worth grew. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that I deserved better. As weeks turned into months, my strength was evident, not just to me but to those around me. Friends commented on how my eyes sparkled differently, and even acquaintances noticed the bounce in my step. But the most significant change was internal. No longer was I consumed by anger or the desire for revenge. Instead, a sense of peace settled in. I had reclaimed my life. Each day was an opportunity to rediscover who I truly was, without the shackles of a demeaning relationship. One evening, as I was settling in with a book, my phone buzzed. I picked it up and saw a message from Grandpa Joe. "Stay strong," it read. "You're doing better than you know." Grandpa Joe had become an unlikely pillar of support during my transition. His decision to change his will was a statement, but his continued messages and calls were a testament to his belief in me. Despite our limited past interactions, he became someone I could confide in. He shared stories of his youth, his struggles, and how he overcame them. Each tale was a lesson, a beacon guiding me through my journey. Soon, I embarked on new ventures. I took up classes, traveled to places I had always wanted to, and even started a small online business. With every achievement, no matter how small, my confidence surged. Grandpa Joe once told me, "Life has a way of balancing things out. You've seen the rough tides, now it's time for calm waters." And he was right. The past was behind me, and the future looked brighter than ever. The road ahead was filled with endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all.